Okay, today I'm going to show you how to make a fruit fly culture for your poison dart frogs. You need a jar of some sort, a ring. I use Super Tough. These are paint strainers from the hardware store. They're just a couple dollars. They look like this when you get them, but there's lots of fabric there, so it makes lots of lids. Some Excelsior. You can get this at the craft store. It's just little shredded wood pieces. Fruit fly media. Some people like to make their own. I find it's just not worth it to have to assemble all the materials and then you're left with huge, massive amounts. This was a 4-pound bag. I've had it for 2 years. I have a breeding pair of dart frogs and 8 froglets. And like I said, it's been 2 years and I still have this much left. You need some fruit flies that are already started in a culture. Some yeast for food for your fruit flies. A measuring cup, and I'll probably get into more things as we go along that I've forgotten. As far as what kind of fruit flies you want, do not catch wild fruit flies. Frogs don't catch flying insects very well, at least not captive bred ones. There's 2 main kinds on the market. There's Hydei, I think it's pronounced Hydei, I believe, and Melanogaster. Melanogaster is often sold in these at local pet stores. They produce a lot more flies, a lot faster, they're smaller, and the cultures end quicker. One of these cultures, which is about $10 at, I believe, Petco, lasts me about a month tops, whereas the Hydei cultures last, up to 8 weeks for me, easily. They're larger flies, they're a little bit slower. They don't kind of do the huge boom of population to where you have too many flies and can't really figure out what to do with them. It's a nice steady numbers. I've never had one crash on me to where they just stop producing altogether. Also, these ones tend to get mites, which can overtake your culture and then you have to toss it. I've never had mites in one of my homemade cultures before, ever. So, to make your own little jar, and I use glass jars. This one's just a spaghetti jar, I think it's Classico. Anything tall. I prefer the wide mouth. I just had a narrow mouth. It doesn't really matter. You want something big enough that there's room for them to culture, and I find these ones actually don't produce as well just because the jars are a little bit smaller. Less media, less room, less flies. So to make your lid, you take your little paint strainer, this fabric stuff, put it over the top, cut a nice big circle about 1 inch down from the band area. Take said cut circle, place it over the top, screw on your ring, flip up your excess, and I actually take a rubber band. This is a hair rubber band, but any kind will work just fine. Secure it to the ring, just so when you take it off again, the mesh doesn't come off with it. And that's it. Now you have a jar for your fruit flies. One other thing to note too, if you do have any fruit flies in your house, we call those flyers, if they get into your culture and interbreed with your fruit flies, which they will, they are all the same general species, so they can breed with each other, you will have an entire species, or an entire culture of flying fruit flies and have them everywhere in your house. So just make sure that you're doing this in an area where there's not other fruit flies around. So to get started, I get my media culture at flymeat.com. It's reasonably priced. It's mostly potato flakes. Some people add vinegar to it to keep mites down. Like I said, I just use this pre-mixed stuff. Works great for me. I've never had any problem with it. You take your measuring cup, 1/3 of a cup of media. You do not have to be exact. This isn't science. Exactly. 1/2 cup of pretty hot water. From the tap is fine. And when you add this to your culture, you need to swirl it quickly. This stuff sets up pretty fast and you don't really have time to slowly sit there and mix it. So a nice good swirl. Because it's instant potato flakes, it swells pretty fast and it's set. I mean, that's it. Kind of one shot. It doesn't really matter if you have little bits in there that aren't mixed. Your fly larva will go through and mix it for you as they're eating. Just a note to any of you that have cats, they will chew through your bag. Keep it out of their reach. As far as fly cultures go, I don't know if you can see, there are larvae down here. That's those little squiggly black heads, and then little white pill-like movements. That's a larva there on the glass. These are the pupa. The ones that are dark are ones that are about to hatch into adult flies. See if we can get a better shot on the other side. There's a bunch of larvae going up, getting ready to pupate. And then there's adult flies. When I make a new culture, I don't like to feed out of it until I see that some of the pupa have become dark. That can take anywhere from a week to 2 weeks for me, depending on how many flies I put in the culture to begin with, how warm it is out. A little warmer, they tend to produce faster. Depends on if I've made 2 cultures at once, and how desperate am I for this culture to have more flies in it. Again, the more flies you have in there to begin with, the more baby flies you're going to end up with, the larger the culture will be. My instructions on my fly media said 50 adult fruit flies. I usually do about 50 to 100. Your next step when doing your culture, after you've got your media in there, is taking your yeast. This is just quick rise, regular old bread yeast. I think it's 99 cents for 3 packs. Sometimes you can get free samples. I think I got free samples at the local fair. They can hand them out. It says a pinch, but I'm a little bit more generous with it. Try and spread it around the bottom. Make sure this does not get wet or it will ruin all of your yeast. Next, your Excelsior. This stuff, like I said, is little bitty wood shavings, and you will have little bitty pieces all throughout it. When I pull some out of it, I like to do it over the garbage can or over the sink, because you will have little pieces falling everywhere. You want a piece that's roughly baseball size. As you can see, there's still pieces coming off. About baseball size, you want it to be able to fit down in the jar but not take up the entire space, but you want enough room that the larvae and flies can climb on it. Try not to have pieces sticking out, because then sometimes it makes it hard to close your lid and you'll have escapees. So that's roughly what you want for capacity. I like to let this cool down a little bit more. That water was a bit hot, but I'm just going to go ahead and do it anyways. It'll be fine. I use a larger deli container to put my flies into instead of trying to get from point A to point B and then end up with flies everywhere. Every time I feed my flies or try to get flies out of a jar, you tap the top a couple times to get them to settle down. Invert it, tap the jar, either on the side or with the palm of your hand. They do jump, they won't fly out of that container. You want to come get a nice close shot on that. There's a bunch of fruit flies. If you leave them in there for a while, sometimes they can climb out. They will stick to the top. So again, if you tap them, they'll go down. That's about 50. So this is going to be a little bit smaller culture, but that's okay. Tap them in. Put on your lid. And that's a fruit fly culture. Again, like I said, it takes 10 to 14 days to get them going. You will have some dead ones in the bottom, that's fine. You just have to wait, and there they go.